Hi, welcome to Edu4Sure online trainings, and today we're going to discuss about the transactions in SQL Server. We have a clear-cut discussion and a lengthy video on how transactions works in SQL Server. As a part of prerequisite, I request you to go through asset property videos, how asset properties work in DBMS video. Please go through the video first, and then you can come down to then you can come down to this video, and only then you can better understand how transactions works and SQL Server. Well, by default, SQL Server is in an auto commit mode. When I say auto commit mode, so let's first discuss what does an auto commit mode mean by, right? So of course some dummy data. So we are creating a table named person, and got person ID of type int, and I'm taking it as primary key. And besides that, I'm also deploying identity function. Starting value is 1 and increment value is 1. So on this person ID column, and we have got last name and first name of type varchar, which holds at most 255 characters each, and then followed by an address of type string, and again it holds 255 characters followed by city of type string, and again it holds around 255 characters, and finally we have got age, which is of type int. So let me select and execute this. Let us see if the table gets created successfully. Yes, the table person has been created successfully, right? And now I'm inserting values into this. See, when I say SQL Server by default, what is the mode of? You might come across these questions in interview. What is the mode of SQL Server? I mean, is it in auto commit mode, or you need to commit every time whenever you run some YAML commands? So let us see. What do I mean by that? Auto commit mode. See, okay. What I'll do is I'll insert these. Okay, let me first enable the line numbers. See, I'll be enabling the line numbers now. Options. Text editor and general. Yeah, here it is. Display, please check this line numbers so that you will be seeing line numbers here after, and it will be easy for me to take out the line numbers and explain things accordingly. So click on OK. This enables line numbers next to this yellow line. So yeah, SQL Server database running a bit slow. So click on OK. It is taking time to get things up. Get the line numbers here in this console. So I think I need to restart. Check. Let me see. I'm opening a new. I'm reopening SSMS, and hopefully we might be getting line numbers in that. So okay. Meanwhile, what I'll do is I'll execute 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These 7 insert statements. One row affected, which means see 7 rows have been affected, which means these 7 rows are inserted into table person. Let us see. How do we see that? Select star from person. It's a command to check if the rows have been inserted into the table person or not. We're expecting 7 rows to be inserted. It's taking time. Sorry for this. So I'm expecting 7 rows. Yes, 7 rows have been inserted. See, 1 we did not pass. 1 because we have got on person ID we have created an identity function, so which generates, and the starting value is 1, and where the seed is 1 and seek is 1, starting value is 1 and the increment value is 1. So like we have inserted 7 rows, so we have got 7 numbers over here. See the first one. Let us check if this is what they're expecting. Hey, story 1 2 3 1 video lane plus lane 23. Yeah. Okay. See, new connection is being established. Connecting to the server. Let me open a database. Winchbox 2014. Right click and you can click select a new query, or you can simply say Control N. No, I haven't got the line numbers yet. I think there is some problem. Options, and then get into query editor, text editor, and this get into this plain text. No, languages, no, file extensions, no, general, general, no, Transact SQL, yes, general, line numbers, okay. So we have got the line numbers also. So select star from TBL employee. See the line numbers, or now you can see the line numbers. So what I'll do is paste this here. So we are done creating this table. So we have executed insert script from 12 till 18. And how do we check for the data in a table? Let's start from table name. Here in our case it is person. So we are executing that to see 7 rows have been inserted. Now what is that? What are we trying to understand? This is, did I use any begin tran or commit tran? I did not use any, because this is because whatever the statement you come up in this SSMS editor, by default it is in auto commit mode. It means behind the scenes each and every transaction is go something like this: begin tran and says commit. Tran is what it is the name given. So by default it is. So if I mentioned this explicitly, begin tran, okay, and I just wanted to run this. What is that I'm doing over here? I'm initiating a transaction to get a hold on this insert script. I'll see, I can, okay, let us see what happens. So I've opened a transaction and trying to insert 2 values. Okay, 2 rows have been affected, but I have not committed them, nor I have rolled back them. So what I'll do is, there is another connection, right? Take this off and say select star from what is the table name? Person is our table name. So let us try to read data from this table. Why is this still executing? Any ideas? This is because we have opened a transaction on top of table person, and we are trying to insert 2 values, but we did not say, we did not confirm the SQL Server database whether to confirm or roll back. That is the reason why the query is still executing, though the table has got only 7 records which were committed. 7 got committed and 2 records are not yet committed. So it is not sure, like this has a lock on this table as of now, right? So how do I do this? Let's stop the execution, and we can still read the data by giving hint to this table with no lock, which means if there are any logs, don't read that. Read the committed data. This is what I'm saying. So now we are able to see 7 records. Okay, fine. With no log. I'm sorry, we are not. We are seeing all 9 records. This is because we are externally asking the SQL Server database that make use of this hint and read the records from that particular table. What if I go back to this window and I say roll back, which means I don't want to insert these 2 scripts. So let us see what happens. Execute. Command has been completed successfully. Now see, let me rerun this. So how many insert statements have been committed to that person table? We are able to see. I'm sorry, I don't understand why it is taking so much of time. Maybe because I have some issue with my SSMS. I think I need to repair this. Let me cancel this query. Or what I'll do is roll back this transaction. Okay. Please bear with me for 2 minutes. So if you can see, like after rolling back, you're able to see only 7 records in this table persons. So what is that it is happening? Whenever you begin a transaction, you won't get a full control on the table. This is because the data, there is something that is being done to the table. I mean, either we may insert the records or we may delete the records sometimes, or we may update the records. But if that insertion, if these DML operations are performed on top of a table under transaction, then it is mandatory. If at all you are explicitly, which means you are externally opening up a transaction, then it is your duty, then it is our duty to either commit the data or either to roll back the data explicitly manually. See, here we don't see this. This happen in the background. I don't need to mention it over here. When I say insert into persons table and I run this command, it gets executed automatically. This is because by default SQL Server database is in auto commit mode. By default, whenever you run this query, it happens internally is begin run comes here, and after this insert statement, a commit run comes here. That is how it works. These are, I mean, begin tran and commit tran are in invisible mode. But whenever you are mentioning things explicitly, it is your duty to either to commit or to roll back. Okay. Now I just wanted to insert these 2 records. I'll once again I'll open the transaction. I'll try to insert these 2 records. See, we have got only 7 records here. I don't need to mention with no log. Now, as I have rolled back the transaction, now click on execute and able to see 7 records. Now select execute. 2 records are inserted, but the data is not committed. Now, if you try to access this, okay, so let us do one thing. I'll say with no lock, giving into this person's table. Let us see. You see, these 2 records are in, but the data is not committed. If try committing the data, and that is if it all we are able to see the data from persons table because of this hint. If I take this hint out and I try to execute, it keeps on rotating. It won't give me any record just like that because the data is not committed and the transaction is open. How do we know if a transaction is open? We have got make use of this at a tran count. If at a tran count is 0, it means there are no open transaction. If this is other than 0, it tells us the number of transactions open. So for better understanding, I'll come up with a column name. Total number of transactions Let me run this and see. It should be one because one tran is open, one transaction is open. See, it is one. If I commit the data, commit tran, now the insertions, this DML statements are made permanent to the database. Now, if you check this, you'll see 0 because there are no transactions open, right? So now you can run this command. It will give you the results. You might be wondering why not 8 and 9, why it is 10 and 11? Because identity function, if at all you are inserting and deleting the data, you can't, the identity, the sequence just goes on. Because 8 and 9 were already there in the table, we have deleted them. So obviously after 9, which is that, it's going to come 10, right? So that is why 10 is over here. And can we insert data here between, I mean, can we reinsert 8 and 9 here? Yes, you can do this by setting identity insert on that particular table on, right? Please go through identities and sequences part 1 to better understand how do we insert, how do we deal with the identity function. So let's come down now. Let us see modes of transaction in SQL Server. Well, in SQL Server, we have got 3 different types of transaction modes, and they are, first one is auto commit transaction mode, which I have told you, like by default, internally, whenever we pass a command DML statement, whatever we do, if at all we are doing an insert, if the insert is free from syntax errors, the record gets inserted. This is why, this is how big, like by default, auto begin tran and auto commit tran will be in invisible mode. You can't see that behind the scenes this happens. So the other one is implicit transaction mode. SQL Server to start an implicit transaction for every DML statement, but we need to use the commit or rollback comments explicitly at the end of the statements. Okay. So what is implicit transaction mode? You don't need to, okay, we'll look into this. We'll look into the practical example sooner, but let us see what are the 3 modes. The first one is auto commit mode, which we have discussed, which we do in general. We've been doing all these sessions. We've been trying, whenever we are creating a table and trying to insert, trying to update, trying to delete, we do this. Auto commit transaction mode is always on. So implicit transaction, now we're going to discuss about implicit transactions, which means this mode, implicit transaction mode, enables SQL Server to start an implicit transaction for every DML statement only. But we need to use the commit or rollback commands explicitly at the end of the statements. We're going to see this, what this statement mean by in practical in a couple of minutes. Just please please hold for a while. So let me finish the third mode as well. It is explicit transaction mode. So it is explicit transaction mode. This provides, I mean, this is what we have discussed right now. Whenever I say explicit transaction, you need to mention begin tran and you need to commit tran. The manual stuff, manually, externally, you are invoking a transaction and you're committing or you're rolling it back depending upon the requirement. Okay, what is implicit transaction on? Whenever you are setting implicit transaction on, to keep things simple, what we do is we don't begin the transaction. Okay, but it is mandatory from our end either to commit or to update. See, when I say set implicit transactions on and I click on execute, the transaction is on. So let's also keep this thing in handy. So as of now, there's no transactions, which means this has been invoked, but we did not run any transactions. Okay. So what I do is, so also into this table, set start from persons table. Let me execute and check if what is that we are expecting person ID 2. This one we are updating first name and last name to Tom Sawyer. Okay. Instead of McDonald Charlie, we are updating it to Tom Sawyer. Okay. What I'll do is let's try to update this. We have set the implicit transactions on. One row has been affected. Now, for better understanding, I'm running this command. See, why did I use any begin transactions? No, but what did I do? I have set the implicit transactions on. Okay, we have done an update now. Implicit transactions as in in explicit transaction, what do we do? To get a control on the transactions, we manually or we externally write a begin tran, and then we do some DML operations, and then later it is our call whether to commit the data to the database or to roll back the data from the database. But now what is that we are doing when we are setting implicit transactions on, which means we can we don't need to write begin tran manually. By default, the transaction has begun, but whenever you are doing any DML operations on top of a table, it is mandatory to commit or to roll back. Now, what I'll do is I'll commit this. So let us see. Let me run this query. If edit options, I don't want this to, I mean, this might confuse you. So let me run this. So one transaction is open transaction is one. If I commit this, if I say commit tran, now this particular update statement has been this particular update data has been updated and is committed successfully to the database. Now let us run this command again. You'll see 0 because update statement DML operation has been committed successfully to the database. How to define explicit transaction? So syntax is like it says begin transaction, okay, and then you need to come up with your what do we say? Don't need this. Say SQL statements, and you can say either you can commit transaction, or you can roll back the transaction. Either of this. Okay, so this is the syntax. I don't think you need any explanation to understand the syntax because it is pretty straightforward. You're beginning a transaction. Whenever you're dealing with transactions, you're setting it on by you're saying the SQL Server database that begin. A transaction is about to begin, and then you're making some DML operations. These statements are specially of type DML. So DML operations are being performed on top of a table, and then you're committing them or you're rolling back them. So that is how the explicit transaction works. So what is that we are doing now again? With the commit, without commit. Let us see this. We know, let us look into the table, select star from person. So what is that we have updated? So earlier it was McDonald, now we have updated this to Tom Sawyer. Now what is that I'm doing? Instead of Corey Hayes, I'm updating the first name and last name of person ID 1 to Luke Lucky. Okay, I've begin the transaction, execute, but I did not commit or I did not roll back. Let us see, I'm running this command, and tran count is used to find the number of open transactions. It's gonna retrieve one, 2, why haven't we committed yet? 2 transactions are open. Sorry, let's do this. Just where I don't know, I might have missed something. Roll back. Okay. So what I do is, so let us again retrieve data from the person's table, Tom Sawyer, Corey Harry, fine. Now what I'm doing is I'm making use of this command begin tran, and then I'm updating person ID 1 with first Lucky and Luke. Okay, we execute. Now let us see the transaction count, the number of open transactions. These 2. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I've set the implicit transaction on, right? So that's the reason it is okay. Whenever you're working with implicit transactions, when you're done, you need to turn it off. Now, okay, come down. Now you can say roll back. Okay, so no transaction as of now. You can see select tran count obviously there wouldn't be any transaction, so obviously it is 0. Now what I'll do is I've opened the transaction and doing an update. See, 2 was because we have set the implicit transaction on, but we did not, but I failed to set the implicit transaction off. So the transaction is still on behind the scenes. So when I manually invoked it, and it is my duty to manually turn it off, right? So one transaction is on. So no commit or no rollback is used. Now what I'm doing is, again, I'm updating the same data, but this time I'm gonna commit. So before commit, I'm rerunning the transaction. Okay. So obviously the tran count would be here. The transaction is open, but it did not commit the data. But again here, the transaction is again open, but here before committing the data, we are checking what is the transaction count. So obviously it will be 2 over here. After a commit tran, here the transaction, this would be 1. So see, so first the transaction count would be 0. For better understanding, what I'll do is I'll make right switch, expecting this to be 0. Here the transaction count, expecting this to be 1. Expecting this to be 2. Expecting this to be 1, as one tran is committed. So we are left out with 1 open transaction. Oh, sorry. Let me run this. Why does this happen? Okay. Let us start from here. Whenever you're working with transaction, you must be pretty careful, because this, if you understand it, and then you can have a good control on this. But if you don't understand this, then it will be a bit difficult for you to understand what actually happening, where actually the transaction count might differ. But now it's gonna see, expecting this to be 0, no transaction were on, so it is 0. Why expecting this to be 1, return 1? Because we have opened a transaction over here, and again we have, but did not complete. Again we have opened another transaction here, and we have taken the count, expecting this to be 2. But after that we have committed the transaction, which means we are down with 1. So expecting this to be 1 as one tran is committed. Okay. Now what we need to do, either we commit or we roll back. So what I do is I commit the transaction, and if we check this transaction count now, it would be 0, because 2 transactions were open and two transactions are committed. 0, right? Got that. So let us now discuss with, till time we have only discussed with the rollback. So what does a commit transaction do? What does a rollback transactions do? Rollback, the word itself is self-explanatory. We are rolling back whatever the data that whatever the real operation that is performed, we want that not to be saved to the database. Rollback. Okay, let's look at in action. So it is simple. If we are committing, it means I'm asking the SQL Server database to save the data into the database. If we are rolling back, this means I'm asking the SQL Server database to not to save the data into the database. So here I'm opening the, see, before you run this command, check for any open transactions. Or you check that it had tran count. So check 0. Now I'm opening the transaction, doing some update operations, and getting the transaction counts, and then I'm committing the transaction. So what does this gonna do? It is checking and then opening a transaction 1 and 0. Before the transaction count is 0. Then I have initiated a transaction by giving begin tran keyword, and then I'm doing an update operation. Then I'm taking the transaction count. Obviously, it will be 1 because the data is not committed nor neither committed nor updated. And then after that, I'm committing the data to the database, committing transaction. Then if I go and check for the transaction count, obviously it will be 0 because there was one open transaction. Now I have saved it to the database. So let us see. What does the begin transaction do? It is the starting point of the transaction. We are aware of it. And SQL commands, DML and select statements. And what does a commit transaction or rollback transaction do? If you say commit transaction, we are asking the SQL Server database to save the data to the database. Either it could be an insert, it could be a delete, or it could be update. Rolling back, it means we are asking the database to not to take the data seriously. And what I mean by that is not to save the data to the database. And we have also got save points. If you play any games, we have got some checkpoints. And what does that checkpoint do? Say we have got a lengthy game of about 5 minutes, and sometimes we have got some checkpoints in between. If you're taking them, if you're collecting those checkpoints, and if you're down with your life, and say if you got hurt, and if you got only 1 life, okay, if you say suppose you have got 3 lives, and checkpoint is something, if you meet the checkpoint and you're done with your lives, when the game starts, you can start from that checkpoint itself. You don't need to come right from the beginning. If you're a gamer, you're aware of this. So save points are something, they can be used to roll back any particular part of the transaction rather than entire transaction. Okay, so that we can only roll back any portion of the transaction where between where can we roll back the transaction? After the save point and before the rollback command. Okay, so let us see this in action. So what is this example? I've initiated a transaction. So before you run this transaction, check for any open transaction. Check for any open transactions. Okay, check for this. It would be 0 obviously. And then I'm opening a transaction and I'm doing an insert into persons table. How many records have we got in persons table? And how do we know that? By running these commands. Let's start from person. Obviously, we have got 11 records and we don't find Mickey Mouse here. So what is that we are doing? No transactions on. We are opening a transaction, beginning a transaction, and then we are doing an insert operation on top of persons table. We are inserting this record and we are saving the transaction insert statement. We're saving this. So we can give a name to the transaction, and that is, let me call it as insert statement. We are beginning a transaction, we are saving the still point, and then what is that we are doing? We are deleting person ID 3 from persons table, and then again we are checking and rolling back the transaction insert statement, rollback transaction insert statement, which means I'm asking the SQL Server database to roll back from here till here, not the insert statement, till insert statement and commit. So what actually happens is, if you look into this person's table, person ID 3 would be deleted and a new record will be inserted where person ID is 12. Let us see this in action. First, I'm getting the data from this table. Obviously, I'll be having 11 records. And then what is that I'm doing? Begin transaction. I've begin the transaction and I'm inserting this data and I've saved this. Okay. Check for any open transactions. Right after this, select star from person. I would get the result of the person's data. 11 records, 7, 8, and 9 would be missing because we have deleted it earlier. And then I'm checking if there are any open transactions, 0. And then I have begin the transaction and I've inserted this record and I have saved the transaction till this point. Okay. I've just saved it, but I did not commit it. Okay. After that, what did I do? And I have deleted person ID 3. And then I have again run a select command. So obviously the person ID 3 would be deleted, and at the same time, see, the record has been inserted, but we did not commit the transaction yet. We did a delete and again we did a rollback. So let us see. See, you are able to see number 3, person ID 3 again. We have deleted, but this delete has been rolled back. So what actually happened? Insertion is successful. Okay, we have opened a transaction insert statement and we have inserted a person. Okay, we inserted a record named Mickey Mouse. First name and last name is Mickey Mouse. And then we have saved the transaction till this point. Okay. After that, I have did a delete. I have run a delete command and I have deleted person ID 3, which is seen over here. It is clear, it is evident that person 3 is missing from this. After deleting, I have run the person, select start from person. So you are not able to see. After 2, it is only 3. There is no 3. So after 2, it is 4. There is no third person ID 3. Okay. So what happened after this? I've rolled back the transaction. Roll back till what point? Till this checkpoint, till this save point, I've rolled it back. From here till here. Roll back transaction till insert statement. And then I have committed the data, which means insertion is committed. Now, if you check for the open transactions, you would find 0. Because the data, we have opened one and we have closed one. See. Now, if you run this command, you would see person ID 3, person ID 1 to 7, 8, 9 would be missing, 10, 11, and 12 as well. See, hope you're clear with how transactions works in SQL Server, right? So let us look at this bullet point. Generally, the transactions include more than one query. In this manner, if one of the SQL statements return an error, all modifications are erased, and the remaining statements are not executed. This process is called auto rollback transaction in SQL. Now let's explain the principle with a very simple example. So I don't need to explain them again. So what means whenever we are working with transactions and if we are if we have got set of statements, if we are doing some multiple inserts or multiple deletes or multiple updates or a combination of insert, update and delete, and in this combination, if any one is syntactically wrong, then whatever the right things that had happened, like insert could be right free from syntax errors, delete could be free from syntax errors. But if there is a syntactical error in update, I mean any error in the update statement, then whatever the DML statements that have run till time will be erased. They are not affected into the database. So I'm trying to insert a new record bunny bugs, and I'm also trying to update age with the middle age where percent is equal to 7. This is wrong. Why? Age is of type and I'm trying to forcefully insert some string character. So this is wrong. This statement is wrong, but this statement is right. We don't find any issue with these statements. So what is that we are doing? Let us see. Opening a transaction. Conversion. And let us see if bunny bugs has been inserted into this table or not. You don't see bunny bugs because though it is right, but it is part of a transaction. So whenever I say transaction, it is a single unit of work. They do if a number of DML commands are written between a transaction, they are not individual, but they are treated as a single unit of work. So in that single unit of work, if any of the statement has got any errors in it, so none of the statements get executed. Okay. So commit run. That's it. So hope you're clear with how transactions works in SQL Server. Thank you. This is all about transaction SQL Server. Stay tuned for other videos. Thank you.